Hello everyone, I'm Brian Easton, the author of the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series, and this is Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Welcome back to the Werewolf Bar, folks. Glad you could join us for a while tonight. We've got a few things to unpack for you, but I wanted to mention from the outset that I am within 10 pages or less of completing the Winter Fox Journals Book 2. But before we get into that, let's introduce the creature of the night. This impressive-looking specimen is Old Elk, which is a blended straight bourbon whiskey, which sounds contradictory, but it means that it is a blend of straight bourbons that legally may contain additives like coloring and flavorings, blending materials. But in the case of Old Elk, they assure us that none of this is true for them. But its blend of straight whiskeys come from other states than its distillery in Colorado, which technically disqualifies it as a straight bourbon whiskey. So as you can see, this particular creature is a bit complicated when it comes to where it fits in on the shelf. So it's probably not looking to win any awards, but with all that in mind, let's pour a little bit from the Old Elk snout here and see what manner of creature we have. To you. Well, that's not bad. That's tasty. But I'm going to tell you, this bottle comes in at about $50, probably in due in no small part to the hardware there that it carries on its crown. I mean, and it's an impressive looking thing. Even the stopper that comes with it has kind of got this crown stag cut thing going on, and that's before you ever get to the elk spout. I mean, it's got good caramel notes in all the right places. It's smooth, it's rich, it's got the spicy rind notes, and as far as its shelf appeal, you know, enough said. But this creature, while it's something to admire and enjoy, I don't think I'll be buying another bottle of it just because of its price point and because there are tastier whiskeys to be had for less. So, getting back to Winter Fox Journals Book 2. Like I said, I'm almost in single digits now from bringing it to a close. So with that in mind, I thought I'd show you some cover ideas that I've been messing around with that I'll be showing to Permuted Press. Which one of these do you like best? So there's no guarantee that any one of those will end up being the true cover, but we'll wait and see. Well, as you may have noticed last month's episode, we debuted some new title sequences, both for the show itself and our regular contributors. It's just something that I like to play around with from time to time, try to class the joint up a little bit. And here comes one of them right now, opening for Amanda Asks.
So, in anticipation of Winter Fox Journals Book 2 coming out, I went back and I reread Winter Fox Journals Book 1. Spoilers, pretty much the whole series. Are we ready? Good. So, in Winter Fox Journals Book 1, Michael faces a Wendigo and is able to trick it out of its name and then get it to leave. It says it's coming back later for a member of his family. I think it's safe to assume, although correct me if I'm wrong, that this is probably the same Wendigo that gets into Sly later and causes so much havoc. If it is, how come when he runs into Sly possessed of the Wendigo, Michael doesn't recognize it or fight it and force it out again? We've already seen he can do it once. Are there more than one type of Wendigo? Is this all manifestations of the same Wendigo? It would be curious to know whether there are more Wendigo out there and whether they can all be beaten the way Michael beat them. I look forward to book 2. See you guys later.
Those are very good questions, and they point to some aspects of the story that are there as subtext or written between the lines, so to speak. So for starters, is the Wendigo that Michael faces in the first Winter Fox book and tricks into revealing his name the same Wendigo which takes possession of Sylvester years later in Heart of Scars? In the Winter Fox Journal, the Wendigo reveals its name to Michael as Jijunda Ayawud, which is complete botchery, I'm sure, of Ojibwe, which is an approximation of the word hatred. And in Heart of Scars, Pretorius writes the name Mastema in the celestial alphabet of Cornelius Agrippa, Mastema being a Hebrew word for hatred. So together with the demon's promise to return for one of Michael's own one day, and then the name being almost identical, I think we can safely assume that this is the same Manitou. So why doesn't Michael recognize it or try to fight it the way that he did before? Well, the first thing to notice about Michael Winterfox when Sylvester returns with the Wendigo inside of him is that Michael is at his lowest point possibly ever. Not only is his health failing, but he's also suffering from the guilt of raising Sylvester so hard, which seems to have helped in his feeding his hatred for the beast. And to better understand Sylvester's training, where Michael takes a teenager who has not been conditioned since he was a young child in the Ray Dosnan way, and is only a quarter Northern Cheyenne to begin with, he plunges him headfirst into some pretty intense, even sadistic regimens. Sylvester takes it and follows through as best he can, but there's more than likely some serious damage done during that time. And let's make no mistake about it, Sylvester James is a broken individual. His hatred and his temper and his general outlook on life, all guided by vengeance, and his propensity for violence is immense. So when Michael says, "It's my fault that you are the way you are," I think we can agree that a lot of this guilt is well-founded, although he is not the only one to blame by any means. So Michael suffers from guilt, not only for what he put Sylvester through, which was, by the way, the only way he knew how to deal with an orphan begging for revenge, but also for angering this Wendigo in his youth when it promised to come after one of his own. So he is now feels like he is paying a long overdue price for his ambitions as a younger man. There's almost a sense that when Michael thought Sylvester was dead, he considered him better off. And seeing Sylvester inhabited by the Wendigo is just like the last nail in his coffin. I mean, as far as Michael knew, Sly had already eaten human flesh and was lost anyway, because he says he doesn't have him in him to kill someone else that he loves. So I think Michael definitely recognizes the spirit, even if he doesn't come out and say so. Michael is feeling old and weak, and even refers to himself in the text as a beaten old man. So much so that when Sylvester comes back to the Hermitage, and the next time we see Michael in the story, he's half frozen in the wilderness where he's gone out to wait to die. Then to follow up, I'll add this question: why doesn't Pretorius knowing its name in Heart of Scars have the same effect as when Michael revealed the name and effectively drove the spirit out during that whole shaking tent confrontation in the book 1. So Griffin Pretorius does basically the same thing in Heart of Scars. He writes the creature's name in Malachim, but there are fundamental differences between Michael's confrontation and Pretorius's, not the least of which is that not only was Dr. Pretorius intoxicated when the Wendigo inside Sylvester rose up to challenge him, Pretorius was by necessity defending himself, not actively trying to exorcise the demon. I think it's pretty clear in the conversation that he's having with Sylvester that he's not mentally or ritually prepared for such an undertaking. But he is able to protect himself nonetheless. And from the Wendigo's part, it demonstrates outrage at this, right? The ashes from the fireplace and the sounds of crows, trumpeting and so forth. The first time with Michael, the spirit went more or less peacefully, with this clause that he'd be back someday. I think the reason why it went fairly easily is because it really didn't have a horse in the race, so to speak. Yeah, he had inhabited the body of this Chippewa man because that's what this Manitou does. It is its purpose. But this second time, in Heart of Scars with Sylvester, it has a job to do. And that is to stay with Sylvester as a way to get to Peter Stubb and collect his soul as per the bargain struck centuries before. So finally we come to the question, is there more than one Wendigo? And what's the difference between the Wendigo and the devil to whom Stubb sold his soul in the first place? Are they the same person? The answer to that first question, is there more than one Wendigo, is kind of yes, kind of no. The way I understand the mythology is that there is a single Manitou known as Wendigo, who is the harbinger of starvation, of storm, of stress, winter death, basically all things evil to the Ojibwe and the Algonquin people. However, like many powerful entities, it can manifest itself under different guises. And this particular emanation or manifestation is under the name of hatred. It's one of those guises. As far as the difference between Wendigo and other demons, the response that we get from Pretorius in Heart of Scars, who doesn't really like to talk about what happened because he doesn't like to give attention to the spirit, is that who a spirit is more of a vanity than what a spirit is. And so depending on your perspective, it could have been the Wendigo or a malevolent god of some kind or the devil himself. Thanks for asking, Amanda. And if you have a question for Amanda to ask, be sure to send her an email at the address shown at the end of her segment. Well, only on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter would you find a connection between a discussion of evil spirits and a Henry rifle. But I am proud to be that connection. Case in point, here's Tex with Tools of the Trade.
Welcome to Tools of the Trade. This is a Henry Rimfire. It is not the original 1860 Henry Rimfire 44. This one is just a 22 Rimfire, 22 long rifle Henry. But for all intents and purposes, or as I say it, because it makes more sense to me this way, for all intensive purposes, that's how I use it in my vernacular, we're going to substitute this modern 22 long rifle Henry for the original 1860 Army Henry, the damn Yankee rifle. Load on Sunday and shoot all week. Now, before the Henry in the 1860, there was the volcanic rifle, which had a weird ignition system and wasn't very reliable, but it wasn't necessarily a metallic cartridge that was self-contained. It was, but then it wasn't. So if you're really curious, look up the volcanic. So then you have the 1860 Henry, and it used the same toggle link style action that's in this, and later on Winchester replaced the Henry design with the John Browning designs. You want to talk about some high-powered cutthroat politics of technology? Go and look at the patent wars that went on in the 19th century, especially between Smith & Wesson and Colt. Because if not for Smith & Wesson holding patent on cartridges, we could have had much better weaponry much sooner, but you used to have to basically either pay a royalty or wait for a patent to expire. Which is funny because now in modern times, just as of like the last 5 years, Henry finally started putting a loading gate on their center fire rifles. But this one loads through the magazine just like an original, even though we're not rotating the barrel here. I just rotate that slide. Doesn't have a safety, but it has a half cock. So full cock, half cock, cycles just like that. And so here you go. Not the original damn Yankee rifle, but still a Henry rimfire. I don't know anybody that reloads for .22 long rifle because it's just not that cost effective, and it probably has its own set of nuances. However, there's nothing that says that you couldn't, in theory, because we treat the lunatic fringe like reality here, that you couldn't reload silver or load silver for a .22 long rifle, and in some ways it might be advantageous, because a .22 isn't super powerful. Make no mistake, a .22 still deserves respect. We're not talking Christmas Story, blow your eye out. No, we're blowing your eye out and probably coming out the back of your head. So it's a firearms caliber that is diminutive but deadly. You have to respect these things. So even though it's small and very low power, that may have some advantages because you can get them in subsonics, so that's very quiet. Even a regular .22 long rifle has a crack rather than a bang. So stealth is an option here. And because it's not super powerful, theoretically speaking, you might not overpower the lighter silver than lead. So there's also the theoretical possibility with the .22 that as long as you got it through the rib cage or through the craniomocular cavity, that any silver you can get into a wolf is good silver, and you would basically poison them. But that also begs the question of, does caliber size actually matter if we're technically astrally wounding these monsters, killing the spirit rather than the body? And that's kind of the conundrum within the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series and the Winter Fox, of the spiritual side of it versus the physical side and mixing together in metaphysics. But with that being said, 22 still isn't my go-to caliber for werewolves. But if you told me, okay, here's the supplies, but this is what you have to work with, always find a way to be dangerous, never give up the fight. There's a way of doing everything. But 22 is not my go-to. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching my segment here for Tools of the Trade on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter.
Thank you, Tex. You know, the 22 long rifle is very often dismissed because of its small size. But Tex is absolutely correct in saying that it is deadly. In fact, in the right hands, it's all a guy will ever need as far as a rifle shell goes. But it's not glamorous, right? Doesn't make the big bang, like Tex pointed out, and it has a reputation as being this inferior, almost worthless kind of caliber. But nothing could be further from the truth. And if you don't think so, you can ask the mob, who for years performed executions with a 22 round to the back of the head. Or you can consult some very renowned woodsmen who will go out into the wilderness with a 22 rifle and a sharp hatchet and nothing else. I personally know people who will hunt everything from a squirrel to a buck with a 22 rifle and bring home the game every time. So if you may be asking, if these are so great, why don't I use the 22 long rifle cartridge in my novels? Well, partly because the bigger the projectile, the more tissue you destroy, so the larger, sexier rounds are generally preferred for heavy, dangerous game, to say nothing of werewolves, or the need to be dramatically correct within the werewolf hunting world. That's my dust up, and we appreciate Tex taking the time to walk us through that cartridge and the Henry brand, of course, and for his demonstration, which are always impressive. Now, let's continue on the topic of spirits with your March installment of Doc Talk Shop. Dr. T. Broussard is going to tell us everything we wanted to know about totem spirits, but we're afraid to ask. As you know, Doc has been walking through his primer series on the occult, especially as it applies to the book series, with an aim to better appreciate and understand some of those supernatural elements with which those books are littered. Here's the doctor.
Tonight, I bring you a talk on a type of spirit work that is integral to the Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter series, but it is perhaps little understood by most, and that is the working with totem animals, as can be seen in both Michael Winterfox and by Sylvester. These two characters show an interesting dichotomy because you have on one hand Michael, who divides his medicine between the eagle and the puma, very story-oriented powers, very positive powers in most native traditions. Then you have Sylvester, whose medicine is divided between the rattlesnake and the owl. Now, both of those tend to be either ambivalent or negative. So what this shows is, while Michael is clearly a shaman, Sylvester is one bad day away from being a sorcerer, Diablero or Brujo. Take your pick. Now, that being said, what is a totem animal? A totem animal in this context is an animal spirit that the practitioner makes a slight pact with, and the spirit of the animal grants some of its power to the practitioner, as well as acting as a guardian for that practitioner in the particular area of life that that animal represents. For example, the owl guards Sylvester by night and the rattlesnake by day. And one can only assume that the eagle would guard Michael at day and the puma would be at night. The interesting thing about that is the winged animals of each are oppositional. You have the solar eagle and then you have the lunar owl. So is that now in other traditions outside of native culture, the owl is a positive symbol. It's a symbol of wisdom. So some of the owl nature in Sylvester can be seen as a reference to his European blood. Now, a totem animal will maintain its bond with the practitioner as long as the practitioner maintains its bond with. So there isn't really a risk of ever losing one's totems unknowingly. Now, in the case of Sylvester, he nearly lost his spirit guides because of being obsessed by the Wendigo. That was a stronger spirit that was able to sort of push his others to the side. Now, that happened partly because Sylvester did not build up his own spirit. If Sylvester was more into the esoteric side of things, he would have known how to gather the power of his totems and use them to invigorate his own spirit and thus be able to fend off Wendigo. Little tidbit here for people that find themselves dealing with weird spiritual phenomena. If you don't like dealing with it, if you want it to go away, build up your own spirit through meditation or devotion to a religious ideal. Basically, don't leave any room for any other power than your own, and then all the phenomena will stop. A lot of the phenomena that people experience, whether it's hauntings or whatever, comes out of making room inadvertently for things. That's why if you are devoted to one religion, for example, Christianity, it would be inadvisable for a Christian to do things like play with a Ouija board, because that is creating a space for something to come in and taint your actual spiritual foundation. And with all that being stated, let me go on and say that I will now relate a small story. When I was learning of what some might call sorcery, I initially encountered a scorpion. And that was one of the animal powers that I ended up very much working with. And I must confess that at the time, I was not all that impressed with the scorpion. I didn't make much of it. Aside from the fact that my mentor and I went round and round about it because from his perspective, it was bad medicine. It wasn't a positive power from his perspective. But from my perspective, it was because it suited my personality at the time. Years later, and I mean like 20, 25 years later, I'm at a gathering of what you would call Samadhi practitioners, and I'm in the bathroom, and I lean down to pick up my pants and, finish things up. And right there, as I was reaching to pick up my pants, put them on, so forth, a scorpion with pale rays was looking right at me. And the stinger was aimed in a very precarious way for my anatomy. So, to avoid the problem, I had to jump backward about 4.5 feet at most, I think, about 4.5 feet out of the bathroom and back into the room I was staying in. So once I calmed down, I had a very good laugh because that's a good example of a totem power demanding recognition and not being afraid to embarrass you or to get that recognition. Now, there is a tendency in modern spirituality to want to cast animals, totem figures, call them whatever you will, as either positive or negative. And the point is that it isn't the animal that is positive or negative. It is the tradition it comes from that casts it that way, as well as how the practitioner uses it. For example, the same condition that saw my scorpion as a negative power also uses that same power to deal with disease, because in that tradition, disease is seen as a form of poisoning. So how do you deal with poison? You get an entity connected to poison to then deal with it. So there's an example of a negative power put to positive use to bring about a positive effect. Now, there are some people that believe that totem animals represent aspects of oneself. And there are traditions in which that's true, but the main lines of American, whether North American or South American traditions, tend to see the totem figures as separate entities that are in relationship to the practitioner, and they are to be seen as separate beings worthy of respect. You also find this idea in some traditions that totem animals can change with time or will come and go in your life. I think they're conflating having a totem with having an animal ally. An animal ally is not the same as a totem. An ally can come and go, obviously. But something you have a formal bond with, as long as the bond is kept on both sides, is not going anywhere. And along with that, there's also the tradition of capturing the totem or medicine of the people, and using that to invigorate your own spirit. That is a part of several skinwalking traditions from North and South America all the way into some Norse territories. Fun fact, you find the term skinwalking in both Norse and Native American terminology. So to me, that would indicate some kind of connection, but I've yet to be able to fully prove that to my own satisfaction. But the similarity of term is interesting. When working with totem animals, it is important to realize that they are not your servants. They are not like a familiar in certain forms of witchcraft. They are beings with their own agenda, their own mind, their own will. They are guardians, they're protectors, and they're to be respected. And in return for all that, they do grant you certain abilities. Now, a familiar, to make a distinction clear, once it's called and bound, will do what it's commanded to do because that's its nature. So, while I know it's common in today's parlance to throw terms around and see them as interchangeable, they're not. So, if you're looking for a totem, you need to look with ramifications of a totem in mind. If you're looking for familiar, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. Oh, the interest for me with regard to with the Werewolf Hunter series is the fact that in many cases the totem is used for spiritual travel. In fact, the winged form in particular, the eagle in Michael's case, the owl in Sylvester's case, would be used to see over distances and thus travel in the spiritual dimensions. In some cases, that travel can also include the phenomena of shapeshifting. And we've yet to have Michael or Sylvester use shamanic shapeshifting as a counter to the werewolfery of the lineage. But it would be an interesting contest, and it would force Sylvester to transgress the physical and spiritual barriers that he's built up for himself. I'm sure Michael would probably have a much easier time of it. Sylvester's perception of being so carnally limited limits what he can do with his totems. But we all have to work with what we got, so we know that he's doing the best he can. He did strike a great blow against lineage, so I'm not criticizing him, saying that each practitioner is different, and his being drawn to the dark side reflects his totems being of the dark side reflects his reasoning or his rationale for his spiritual quest. His path is rooted in vengeance and in qualities that are detrimental to the human spirit in most traditions. So if he came at his quest different motivations, he would have different totems. So one of the things about totem animals is if you know the totem someone works with, that can tell you something about them, the kind of things that they work with, what their motivations are, also what traditions that they work with. Because, for example, if we were to come across someone with a snake totem, but they use it for healing, that would not be the same as someone who uses a snake totem to attack their enemies. So there is no one size fits all for any of this. It is vastly important to understand that having a totem relationships, whether it's one animal or two, three, that is a connection to another world. It's a conduit from one aspect of reality into another. And that's why it's common for a practitioner to have a talisman of some kind that represents animal. It's a tangible connection. As important as that tangible connection is, it's equally important to realize that you don't need the object. If you keep up the bond, whether you can see it or feel it or whatever you want to call it, whether you have an object or not, that totem's going to be there for you. It's like having a family member. You have to tend that relationship. And if you do, you have a backup that represents. Now, in the tradition I learned, one of the functions of a totem was to carry the practitioner from the mundane into other realms. And that's where you get the idea of spirit steeds and things. Now, interestingly, in European traditions, this is where you also get the idea of witches flying on goats and things to get to the Sabbath. So again, you have vastly different traditions. But you have similar phenomena. It's how they're used, they're different. So keep that in mind. And it's important when dealing with ends and stuff to be mindful of what may be a negative to you. A black cat, for example, could be very positive for another practitioner or in a different tradition. For example, among the Norse, the goddess Freya often took the form of a cat. So one of the libels against her followers under Christianity was, they had cat familiars. Well, they didn't have cat familiars. They had cats because they honored their gods. And the goddess sent her protectors to her. So, see, now, interestingly, another animal people wouldn't normally think it was negative, but it is negative in many traditions, is the turkey. In certain North American traditions, you will find that a turkey is a major totem for sorcerers or witches in the negative sense because they have large claws or they speak, and the witch or the sorcerer would take that form or use that talismanic object of the claws to do great harm. You find references to turkey scratching all through Native American lore as the sorcerer and witchcraft. Similar fashion, the raven is seen often as a creature of wisdom, but is also morally ambivalent. So you have wisdom, but you also have both negative and positive forms of magic associated with the raven. And usually when you find ambivalent figures, you'll also find them linked to shapeshifting, as one will with the raven, as one will with the snake, and even to an owl to a lesser degree. Creatures like the bat are often associated with, obviously, nocturnal power, traveling through the underworld, but also fertility and luck, as well as illness and disease. So it's all in how they're approached. The person who evokes a bat as a negative will get a negative bat type of spirit for their totem. On that note, let me state very clearly, in most traditions, one does not choose one's totem. One discovers one's totems, one's protectors, through a process of ritual, typically involving fasting, herbal and other kinds of sacraments that would alter consciousness, and whether through vision or visitation, what comes to you in those contexts is all your totems. Now, like I said, this can be one totem or two, or any number. Some systems have a different animal totem for every aspect of a person. But there is no one size fit all for all that. So, that's another thing to think about when you're thinking about working with totems. What does the word totem refer to in the system you're looking to work? In other words, modern online resources for animal information not always very good because they lump everything together. So be clear in what you're seeking, and you'll find the right information. It would be interesting to see how Sylvester's relationship with his totems evolves as he gets older. It'll be interesting to see in the Winterfox series how Michael uses his totems differently than Sylvester does. And on that note, I would like to thank you all for watching, and I hope it was educational and fun. And as always, mind the moon and mind whatever spiritual contracts that you make out there, because they will always be collected on. Good night.
So totem animals are an interesting set of spirits, aren't they? And I'm very glad Doc took the time to go over them. And because in this day and age, you have a lot of people who like to claim their totem or spirit animals. They like to wear jewelry to signify them, or get tattooed with their images, when, as the doctor pointed out, one does not typically choose one's totem animal, but is rather chosen by it. And it really is remarkable to take a look at how many people just claim the wolf as their totem animal just because they feel some affinity to them. And I mean, come on, who doesn't like a wolf? Nobody ever wants to adopt a ground squirrel or a waterfowl for their spirit animal, which doesn't mean that chipmunks and ducks wouldn't love to have you. But I'm glad that Doc decided to kind of point some of this out and to point out the difference between totem animals and familiar spirits, or just familiars, just as he compared and contrasted the spirit guardians of Michael and Sylvester. Both have strong, dangerous totem spirits because both are warriors who require potent, predatory animals to guard them. Michael's is much more where he's supposed to be in terms of his relationship with the other side, whereas Sylvester has always struggled with that part of it. Like Doc mentioned, Sylvester's spirits suggest a much darker life than Michael's do, especially in terms of the owl, which is, in the mythology of the Plains nations anyway, basically just the boogeyman. But in both instances, the totem spirits are absolutely necessary in their feud against the beast, and they are part of what makes both characters good hunters, instead of just a couple of guys with silver bullets in the woods. Many thanks to Dr. Broussard for bringing this to us tonight. As you know, I like to commission artists, whether they are visual, musical, or literary, to do pieces related to my books. And I have several pieces of art from various talents hanging on my walls. And I wanted to share with you my latest art right here. So this is the piece commissioned by portrait artist Denver Bababoko from the Philippines. I am going to call this one just Sylvester Logan James. And this will be from the first novel, Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter. Down the road, I plan to commission others, one from Heart of Scars, one from The Lineage, ultimately one from The Woodsman when that comes to light. You see what an excellent job that the artist does here. Denver really knows how to put in the detail, the frayed edges of his horseman's coat. You've got the leather work on his holsters, his belt buckle even. He's got his medicine pouch around his neck, firing both of his Colt 45s with the full moon behind him. Now, this may not be your idea of what Sylvester looks like, and that's okay, because every artist that I have do a rendition of him, he always looks different. So maybe he's timeless, like James Bond. No one look to him. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Sylvester Logan James. Denver is a gifted individual, isn't he? He's done so many just stunning portraits and fantasy pieces. If you get a chance to look him up, please do. He makes beautiful art. Before we get out of here, I want to mention again that as of December last year, both my Brian P. Easton author page on Facebook and my book page are defunct due to my account being hacked and summarily suspended without reprieve by the bots at Facebook. Now, both those pages are still up and visible, mind you, but I have no control over them, and I cannot post to them. So they are, in essence, zombie pages. My new Facebook page, as of 2023, you can simply find by entering the book title, Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter, into the search bar. It contains the full name of the series, whereas the old page is missing the words "of a" in its title. So if you haven't yet, please head on over to the new page and follow it if you're so inclined. Thanks for joining us this evening, and until we get together next month, happy hunting and mind the moon.